Hey gang, KR King of D&D Homebrew here, and today I'm going to talk about encounters and how to think about them in such a way to make them more interesting to your players and more about your world than simply, oh, we're going to have a battle, right? And I've been thinking about this because I've started this campaign where I'm creating encounters, thinking about the composition of the players, their level, all this kind of thing, but also ways that I can make encounters that are a little bit outside of the box. And, you know, when you think of set pieces that you've created, you know, the Orcan villages here and the players come through there and you know they have their scouts out or whatever, and you've got pretty much an idea of what's going to be happening, you know, when the players come. Or are there activities for that orc village that might be going on that will make that encounter more interesting? And then you have random encounters or random monsters, as we used to say, or some people say wandering. I think of wandering as more like in a dungeon. You know, you have a gelatinous cube that moves around the halls to eat what it can, or, you know, carrion crawlers looking for dead things and that kind of thing. Whereas a random monster is sort of, you know, the price of doing business. If you go into an area where there are bears, you may run into a bear, right? That's just part of being there. And if you leave food out, like camping, you increase your chances of running into a bear. Now, I know there's people that say, well, I don't want to fight random monsters. I just want to get to where we're going. It's a waste of time. I've had those battles before. And that may be your style. My style is if you go into an area where there are monsters living, there's a chance you could run into them. But instead of just having them appear, you know, they 60 feet away, they rush towards you, roll initiative, what are some ways you can make those encounters more interesting and more connected to things that will create good storylines? And I think the thing to think about is what is happening when the players encounter the monster or the NPCs, you know, or whatever. So if you come across an orc village, is there something going on? Is there a ceremony going on? A wedding, you know, a transfer of power, an anniversary? You know, I mean, the classic, and if they're preoccupied with this ceremony, do the players come across and see this, and what do? Do they, you know, the classic, it's totally not PC, but if you remember, I think the second Temple of Doom, where they see the human sacrifice into the volcano or in the lava, and, you know, Indiana Jones and company see it, and I believe the first time, that I can't remember if they're captured right away, but there's an opportunity, you see this going on, and you can retreat. You don't have to always get into a battle with things, right? They're preoccupied. So again, think of if there's a wedding. Now, again, this can be connected to a storyline. Two Orcan tribes are merging, and there's this wedding, and the players come across this, or perhaps they hear about it. Again, this doesn't have to be a random encounter. They hear that this wedding is going to occur, and there's someone's going to disrupt it. I've talked about this with feasts and stuff like that, where you know, some event is getting people together, and this is the way to think about an encounter. So, would aberrants or beasts we don't think of as having ceremonies, but certainly any other undead. Let's say a group of undead gather together, and you have, you know, some wraiths or they attract wights or whatever, and they reenact some ceremony from their past life that they remember. And once a year they do this, and so the players, whether they hear about this or they come across it, if you want to have a random monster of wights or something, instead of just having them come forth from their barrows, why not have them involved in something that makes it a little more interesting? Because what you can do then is tie it to a storyline. So if the players defeat the wights and wraiths or whatever it is that's having this ceremony, and these mounds, now they, you know, dig up the mounds and whatever items are there, if they're burial plots, but maybe not. Maybe there's just some gathering place where something occurred. This was a meeting place, or this is where ceremonies were held. There's a stone under the dirt long since overcome by the elements, and the players can then discover this if you choose. Or, as I talked about, I'm referencing all these videos, having mysteries, you don't necessarily need to connect it to a storyline just to add flavor to your world. Instead of just having an encounter with wraiths or wights, now it's this, you know, they're reenacting this thing. It gives some history. You might be able to connect this later on, as I talked about there, or you might not. But what it does is it makes the encounter, they're still going to have to fight the undead, right? The undead hate the living, and the minute they detect their presence, they want to destroy them. Maybe they're even more infuriated because they were going through this ceremony that reminded them of their past life. But when the players finish the battle, if they do, obviously, then you've got this extra element to it. So ceremonies are a really great thing in terms of ongoing activity, and also it can serve to distract such that the players could just observe it. Maybe they go away. Don't ever forget, discretion is the better part of valor. A lot of times, if you've set something up that the players should know better, so two orc tribes have gathered together and they're having a ceremony, and the players for some reason see this or are close to it, it might be really smart for them to just keep moving or, go away. But again, that they're distracted. It makes sense that they wouldn't necessarily be watching. But if the players stumble across, a la Indiana Jones, of a sacrifice, right? Orcs are sacrificing an elf over a lava pit or whatever, right? It's clearly, do the players just go, well, that must be their religion, I can't interfere or whatever, or do they just are compelled to do something, and it might be to distract them long enough to, disrupt something or what. Again, depending on how many orcs there are, the strength of the party. But it gives them more incentive because then they're going to rescue that person. And then, of course, that can open up another storyline. And there's some other rules in terms of storytelling. Get in as quickly as you can to a scene and get out as fast as you can. Don't linger. Well, there's another thing with encounters is to think about an encounter as to what is happening. I mean, as I said, the traditional one is the monsters are moving through the wilderness or the dungeon looking for something to eat, and they come across the players, or they're in a room in a dungeon where they live, and the players open the door, right? And you just have a battle because they're opposed to one another, although you can have parlay and all that stuff. But what are other activities that things take part in that the players can come across in the middle of? So you could have creatures in the middle, they've just killed something and they're eating it, right? They're gathered around and they're eating this thing, and the players come across it and see them. And are the monsters going to necessarily jump up and attack something new? Are they just going to try to guard the kill and then watch for what the players do? And if the players choose not to attack, then nothing happens. But of course, if the players are out, if your world depends on experience points, for example, the players may say, we want to attack this thing. An animal type intelligence, this would be something that's pounced on something that's killed it, they watch, versus something a little smarter or a little more sentient that knows, those humans, I want to, because again, it could be something really smart that's killed something and is inspecting it or going through, looting it like players do, looks up and sees this group of players. Again, do they have everything that they wanted to pick up? Are they going to drop things and attack the players? Or how is this going to work? Now, obviously, you have to prepare that in advance, but again, it shows that things are happening. You have a dynamic world, right, versus the static world. You have the things, other creatures that are going out and trying to find loot and booty just like the players. Another thing about post-battle situations, a group of gnolls has just defeated, another group of NPCs, let's say, or they've come across a village, right, and they've sacked the village and they're gathering up their prisoners and they're preparing to eat them and, or bring them as slaves or something. And the players come along and they see this. What reaction do they have? Could the players have? Could there be prisoners that if escaped can pick up a weapon or something and fight? Maybe just as a zero level person or whatever you want to do, just like a club type improvised weapon kind of stats, but still they could help. And then, of course, what's the story there with these gnolls that have been, again, the way the monster's set up, they just rampage across the landscape, just sowing destruction. And so they need to be stopped or, whatever. But instead of just having them appear, they're involved in this activity. There's more room for that. And you can also have these signs of this. So in the distance, you see smoke, right? Off, let's say you're going in a certain direction and you've got to go off this way, but you can see smoke. It might be a mile away. It might be a little bit farther. Who knows? Do the players go and approach it? And as they approach it, that's when they see the gnolls sacking the village, or the gnolls have already sacked the village. So you come across and there's a burned, hamlet, let's say, 4 or 5 buildings, no bodies, maybe a couple, maybe one that's been ritually placed up, or whatever, or maybe left alive to warn others so they give the information to the players what happened. What do the players do? Do they track the gnolls? Do they try to, avenge this? Or do they go, well, bad luck for them, right? And again, this is different. This is giving them a chance. It isn't just, okay, I got gnolls. They show up, roll initiative. It's, do you want to chase the gnolls? Are you interested in this? Or do you not figure out what it is? You just find this, burned out hamlet, no survivors, no bodies even. They've taken them to eat or something. And what? You can track using survival or if you have a ranger, obviously that's going to be much easier, but whatever. Is that what you want to do? If they don't, if they're like, well, I've got another mission, do you then say someone when they go to some town or whatever, there's been no news of Smithville, right? This hamlet. And of course, the players have news. It was, attacked. Do they mention this? Do they keep quiet? This adds a little tension too, in terms of whatever the politics of your world are, in terms of why didn't you tell us, or why didn't you try to do something or track them down? If they do track them down and they kill the gnolls and they rescue, let's say the gnolls captured a bunch of people they're going to use as slaves or something, and they free them, the players could get a reward, not just from this hamlet, but if there's an overarching political structure in your world, such as some feudal lord thanks them, gives them something or sends them on some assignment. They've proven themselves as noble warriors, right? And it's not just fighting gnolls. Another thing you can have is to have two groups of creatures that are fighting one another. Whether they're the same groups, gnolls fighting other gnolls, I don't know. Let's say gnolls fighting a band of wargs, right? Do you care about this? Why they would be fighting one another? Just the wargs are always hungry. The gnolls are always, rampaging. They come across each other. So you're just watching this battle and who's going to win? And then do you wait for the one side to win, but they're totally weakened, and then you make your attack? Would they notice the players watching this and suddenly stop and decide, let's go get them, and so they work together? Now, again, wargs, let's say wargs, they supposedly turn on their masters, so the traditional orc running them, supposedly they've gone berserk, they're mad at their masters and they're fighting, and then suddenly they see the group of players, and they're both like, well, wait a minute, first let's kill them, and then we'll finish this off later. And now the wargs are like, find me some food or something like that. So again, there's a risk there, but you see these two forces fighting one another, and they're going to be distracted by that. The players can just observe, they can move away, again, wait till the end of the battle, decide what to do. Or again, they can join in for one side if it's clear, it's another group of the humanoid races, the standard player races, they can just join in. And there's other kinds of encounters that aren't just fighting monsters. So suppose you're crossing a desert, the classic skeleton of something that is just enormous, right? Or the husk of some sandworm that's 100 feet long. Then the players, are they going to investigate that and start poking around? Are there things living? How long has it been dead? Let's say it's not been dead that long. It's just the creature that's died for whatever reason. Well, that's going to attract things, centipedes or other carrion crawler type creatures that may pour out of this thing when the players say, hey, there might be treasury inside of there, right? But they could have just walked away. They could have just ignored it. Now, a skeleton, nothing's going to be living there. The players might investigate this. There might be nothing to it, nothing more than just what we see in a movie, fantasy or sci-fi. They're crossing the desert and they see a skeleton of something. It, just adds a little flavor. I just recently, in my campaign that I'm running, I had the players saw buzzards off in the distance flying around in a circle. And they were like, we've had these battles. We almost got killed by these bandits. We're not going to go investigate that. And so they never did. And what was it? Well, I know what it was. But it doesn't matter, right? I'll just use it for something. Maybe they'll go through there and they'll see the remains of this. It's basically, they had three bandits that they let go. They took all their armor and said, get out of here, because they surrendered and they wandered. Of course, they're totally vulnerable. And they got killed by some creatures that the players are going to run into at some point. I'm not going to say anything, just in case someone's watching. But they ignored the buzzards. But that's a classic thing of there's something going on over there, just like smoke in the distance, something that reveals it, something large flying around. I talked about, having in the mysterious events, a shadow comes over, but this is just like something in the sky that you see, and it's quite large, and it flies off, and maybe it goes down. It's clear that it's landed. Do the players want to investigate? Depending on their level, depending on, could they tell from that distance how large it is? That's really tough to do that, because things get distorted, and it's things that are very big look small until they get very close to you. But again, maybe that does, as it goes down just over the tree line, you realize, oh, that's really big, or it's medium size, whatever it is. Manticores that are landing off, they're attacking something. Again, you come in the middle of a battle and the manticores are attacking, but you see that from a distance. That's an encounter, right? That's something out of, that's, as I said, the cost of doing business, of traveling in the world, is things live in the world, and there's a chance that you can run into them. So you see that, and you have an opportunity, if they want to go investigate. And what I find is, unless, as I said, the buzzards, the players were freaking out because they were first level, and so they just were like, we have this battle, barely survived. But in other circumstances, they go and investigate, right? That's what you're there to do. You're there to, have combat, do role play, and explore. And part of the exploration process, if you see something interesting, to go for it. So those are some ideas, just how to make encounters, how to think about what is the activity that these creatures are doing. Are we in the middle of it, right? The middle of the wedding, the middle of the battle? Are we at the end of it? When they're eating their prey, they've successfully killed something. And also to remember that all sorts of sentient monsters can have rituals or ceremonies or events that they take part in. And they can be mysterious things. Some aberrants are gathered together. The Nyogi, the spider creatures, they gather once a year for some ceremony to establish dominance. I don't know, when they have the two top Nyogis are fighting, the others are watching. And somehow the players come across this. Now they have that decision to make. And it's just as simple as you want to have an encounter with orcs, and you don't just want to have a hunting party out looking for things to kill, but there's something going on with the orcs, something important to their society, a fight between them, or a time period when they're not, or they've just, as I said, they've just raided some town or something and they're on their way back, or they've got this booty on them, or maybe they're planning to make an attack, and you come across and you see that they're all crouched and hiding or moving very stealthily, and they're so intent on what they're trying to do that they don't see the players coming up on them, right? That's a different way to do it. That's it makes it interesting, and it makes your world seem real. And if you like my content, please subscribe to my channel, leave some comments. I always love them. And of course, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.